Good morning, everyone. This is Lori Harris. I'm your host today, and I'm partner of Harris White Cell Consulting. And this is our podcast, Maximize Excellence. And today I'm honored to have Dr. Kimberly Lemke, owner and founder and CEO of Drift Incorporated. And today, you guys, we're going to have the greatest dialogue, I think, around sleep and what it means in regards to productivity, what it means to well-being. And before I go there, I'm gonna share a little bit about Dr. Lemke, and I also at the end of this, I'm gonna give her some time to share with us maybe a few comments. But please feel comfortable and please feel free to post your comments and share with us your thoughts as we have this dialogue. Also, if you've got any questions that you want Dr. Lemke to answer, please post those in the comments and we'll go ahead and get those to her today and get those answered for you. And I look forward to this conversation. So Dr. Kimberly Ann Lemke is an esteemed licensed clinical psychologist, and she's also a corporate wellness consultant. She's also a certified sleep science coach. She's a keynote speaker, an author, and a winner, which I'm really excited to say because we've both had this honor and this pleasure of having this award. But she was actually in the class of 2024 Enterprising Women Award, and last year I was in that class of 2024. So I'm honored to join you, girl. It's really fun to be a part of that group. But even more so, I want to talk about her passion. So her passion is deeply embedded in promoting sleep and wellness and mental health. And she's dedicated her whole career, which she's spent the last probably 15 years plus now, and her experience in empowering individuals and organizations to achieve optimal well-being. And she does that through focusing on sleep science and its profound impact on overall health. So, as a certified sleep science coach, she celebrates her groundbreaking efforts to enhance sleep quality and reduce the organizational costs that are associated with sleep deprivation. And how many of us out there, you guys be honest, how many of you out there don't sleep well? And she's going to talk about all the different categories and uniqueness of that situation. And she talks about the efforts to enhance sleep quality and reduce those costs. And then also she's got an innovation online sleep course, and she's going to talk about this called Drift. And it's earned recognition for its unique approach to tackling sleep-related challenges. And her company Drift goes beyond the you need to know or you need to sleep more. You hear that all the time. Oh, you need to get better sleep, or you need to sleep more, or you need to get more sleep, more hours of sleep. And so that advice, she actually works with her clients to provide that unique and transformational strategies that help them to optimize their well-being, their workplace environment, and their workday in order to get that type of rest that really fortifies that well-being each and every day so they can go in and be productive. And again, it's a very holistic approach, and it's a very positive approach and a lot of fun, I think. Yeah, you're going to hear that as well. And then I just want to brag a little bit more about her because she continues to shape that opportunity in this current state of leadership development in the realm of sleep science and mental health advocacy. And she's very involved, and you can find her a lot on media and events, and she's very active, not even busy, I will say, because you're pretty selective about where you go and what you do, and it's very purposeful. So I will say you're very active and purposeful and driven in making sure this message gets out and the support gets out, and your service and your work is directed towards those who are in alignment and ready for this. And I will say she's really dedicated to her community, not only in Illinois, but also nationally and globally, in that she serves as chair of continuing education for the Illinois Psychological Association, and she was appointed to the Mental Health Board, where she serves as secretary and president of the planning committee. And then she also volunteers for the disaster action team as the mental health disaster team member for the American Red Cross. And I got to say, we were just having a conversation before we went live about that as well. And there's lots of work there. And so I'm really honored, you guys, today to bring her in this dialogue and conversation to our podcast and share her with you. And so welcome, Dr. Lemke. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you, Lori, for such a kind and thorough introduction. I appreciate you, and congrats to you on winning as well. And just feel lucky and blessed to have met you there and learned about your brilliance as well. And glad to be here talking to people about sleep and how to make it better.
Woo! I'm excited. I hope I'm going to have at least one or two takeaways today about sleep. I know my husband and I are always talking about what we can do better to get that better night's sleep and quit waking up in the middle of the night with things like restless leg and some of these, I don't think we have sleep apnea, but sometimes it's just maybe caffeine induced and all those other little, I don't even know what to call them. They're like a leech that sucks onto you and you just get out of whack somehow. Yes. I don't know what to call it. So as we dive into this conversation, really this audience today is leaders from around the world. A lot of them are executives. Many are in that senior leadership role as well. And then there's those emerging leaders, those rising stars as well. And I sometimes think about, current state, present state are those that lead now. And then what about those that are up and coming, and how can we help them establish a better routine and really get in a groove where their leadership might be better than today's leadership as well. So these are the kinds of practices that we feel truly maximize excellence. And so we couldn't be more honored to have you with us today. So I'm going to start with, let's even say, I want to know more about how you got into the business of sleep.
Yeah, that's a good question. I love how I feel like at points, everybody's a leader, right? It looks different, right? And so to your point, how do we still lead regardless of sort of where we are? And then how do we help other people lead and sort of bring them up as well? And one of the things that inspired me was I own a private practice and own a group practice. And we just kept seeing so many people with anxiety and depression. And when we're coaching people and doing therapy with people, they would have job loss and divorce and troubles coping. And so one of the questions we always ask people is, how is your sleep, right? It's just sort of a standard for when you go in to see, anybody in the field. And we just kept seeing over and over again, the answer was either, I can't fall asleep at night, or, I'm not getting out of bed, or I'm just more fatigued, or I wake up at 3 a.m., which is like the dreaded sleep time that people wake up at. And so I decided at that point, I had heard this Desmond Tutu quote that said, as opposed to pulling people out of the river, why don't we go back and figure out why they're falling in the first place? Right. And that's really what spurred this was, I see people on the other end a lot, and the people have already fallen in, whether it's the health issues or anxiety or depression, or when I coach sort of CEOs and executives, it's, seeing the turnover rates in their businesses and the costs that they spend on insurance for their people. And so my goal really was to go to the sort of the beginning of that river and figure out why they're falling in. And sleep just kept being the answer that, and now, thank goodness, and you and I had a chance to speak of this, like, thank God we're talking about this a little bit more now, because it's so important. Before we had this whole, I'll sleep when I'm dead mentality. And I still encounter that, to be honest, at certain retreats I do. But the reality is, I think people more and more now are understanding that you cannot lead without sleep. And the people you're leading cannot perform without sleep. And so that's how this all started, was really just trying to go and help people understand how to get a better night's sleep. And that way they can be more productive, they can be happier, they can lead better, and just have more joy in their lives.
So, I did a little research and I was looking at some of the most common sleep issues or disorders, or what do you call them? How do you categorize these various types of things that impact our sleep? What do you call them?
So you have the official diagnoses, right? So we can go in and we can diagnose with your insomnias or your restless leg or your sleep apneas and those sort of things. What I find though is that, and you sort of touched on this before, it's sort of like all the little, I call them like thieves, sleep thieves, right? That like happen during the day, right? Or at night, right? So it's like a temperature, or it's a noise, or it's our spouse, right? Or it's our kids, or it's, the alcohol we had, or whatever it is. And so what people really focus on is nighttime. Mm-hmm. They focus on, okay, sleep equals night. And really sort of the thing that makes drift different, if you will, is that I think of it as a football game. So when we have to think about sleep, if we're not doing it until nighttime, that's the fourth quarter, right? Do you have to still play? Do you still have to be aware of it? Yes. But if you're not playing the first 3/4 of this sleep game, you're going to lose every time. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of information out there on is, right, sleep. So when we talk about like sleep is, a daytime issue, it's because if we're not paying attention to what we're doing during the day to build this, what I call a sleep balloon, then it doesn't matter what we do at night. It doesn't matter how amazing our routine is, our ritual is. We really have to focus on our days. And there's just so much power in it, right? Like, because now if it's, if I wake up and I know that I can compensate today for last night's sleep, just by understanding how sleep works, I'm so much more empowered. So, corporations can set up meetings differently. Individuals can set up offices differently and just run their lives differently.
I really want to dive in and kind of set the table for everybody too, because things like decision fatigue and sleep disruption and chronic fatigue, the shifts in the circadian rhythm, screen time. Oh my gosh, screen time, work-related sleep anxiety, caffeine-induced, overuse of sleep aids, chronic jet lag. How many of our executives and leaders that are out there now, especially after we've opened the world back up, are now again experiencing jet lag, sleep paralysis, the stress-induced insomnia, burnout related disruption, and things like delayed sleep phase syndrome? These are all common to you, but a lot of people don't really understand all of these terms. And I'm not asking that we dive into them, but I'm hoping that if you have had these diagnoses or you've had these are all related to this discussion we're having today, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think too that we get sometimes so focused on, and I'm guilty of this too, right? Like I will have a symptom and I will Google it, and at the end of it, I have everything known to man, right? And and so I think sometimes we type in poor sleep or issues for sleep, and then we're like, oh my gosh, right? Like this is next level bad. I have this, and this, and I think sometimes that doesn't give us anything to do with it, right? It's just like, okay, I must have this. And I'm such a fan of really sort of taking ownership and being able to have control of the moments in your life rather than sort of passive. So if I can't work on sleep until it decides to be dark out, like, okay, then I really am limited in terms of what I can do with sleep. And that's what, when we hear all those, right, what I always tell people to do too is, I've never had to ever do a workshop or keynote teaching like lambs or sheep or like cows how to sleep, right? Like we're animals, right? Like our bodies are meant to sleep, and then we just get in the way of it. And so, I always tell people too, like sometimes the more information we deep dive, we just have to go back to the basics of sunlight, of senses, the things that build the sleep balloon so that you use it at night. So sleep is one of the simplest things. And if you say to anybody who doesn't sleep is simple, they will be so mad, right? So it's so frustrating, just get some better sleep. And they're like, thanks for that. So but let me try. I never thought of that, right? So but part of it is if I have people understand this idea of a balloon, that what we're doing all day long from the moment we wake up is we're building what I call a sleep balloon. And you're building that and you're making it as tight and taut and big as possible. And I'm not going to get into the details, but it's basically filled with sleep chemicals, right? And you build these sleep chemicals all day long by using your senses. your sunlight, which is key. If nobody gets anything other than this, from this sunlight, there's a part deep in our brain that's what it's looking for. And it knows to start waking you up. So there's things that we can do during the day that set us up for a good night's sleep. And so if we've Googled these things and been like, oh, I got this, and this, you still have the same sleep balloon pretty much as the rest of us. Yes. And so just, maximizing that so that you can perform better and feel better.
So talk about how sleep works then. Let's start there.
Okay. So
it probably looks like this, right?
So we have two systems that maximize our sleep. So one is our circadian rhythm. So when you talk about, jet lag and things like that, whether we want to or not, you got 24 hours of sleep, right? Like you've got a clock, you get give or take a little bit, but you can't be like, oh, I'm super busy today. Can I just have a few extra hours, right? Your clock's like, you get the same thing as everyone else. Right. Although sometimes that would be nice. So right, that part just does its thing. And that part is really regulated by things like your routines, right? Like it wakes you up at around the same time, you go to sleep at around the same time. And so routines and things like that are really core to that. So when you have jet lag, right, part of it is that clock, you mess up the entire routine of it. And so that's what sort of messes up that circadian rhythm. But it helps us, right? When we're maximizing it, and we get into a rhythm, that helps us have wakefulness and sleepiness. The other part, which we have a lot more control over, is that sleep balloon. So it's a sleep drive system, basically. And all that really means is that you are building sleep chemicals during the day to use at night. So you are filling that balloon up with all of these so that at night you use it up. The next day you fill it back up and you use it up. But a lot of times we sort of do things that are counterintuitive, that work against us. And so I always tell people to make sure that the things you're doing are actually building that sleep balloon and that sleep pressure so that you can use it at night. And that, along with your circadian rhythm, is what sort of gets you through the night and gets you that good night's sleep.
Wow. And you talk about it being a daytime issue. So I wake up a lot of times 6 a.m., between 6 and 7 a.m. a lot of times. That's my wake up time. And I'm not good at the go to bed time. The sleep time is not, that's where I'm not good. Got to be better at that. But my wake up time seems to always be that cycle. And I understand that even with circadian rhythm, there's certain types within that as well, right?
Yep.
Talk about that a little bit before we dive into the daytime part of this and from the morning through.
So, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers can usually put themselves in one of these categories, right? Uh-huh. So, the main two that we talk about are night owl, uh-huh. and morning lark. So night owls are your people who, they're probably around 11, 12, right? Ish sort of people. And then you have your morning larks who, are up bright and early, 5 a.m., go to bed at, 9 o'clock. And, it's funny how they don't necessarily get along in terms of they can irritate each other, right? Like, so, because they're like, just come to bed. And, the morning lark's like, just come to bed. And the night owl's like, what are you talking about? It's 9:30. Like, I am nowhere near ready for bed. And one of the interesting theories behind it is that possibly it was created for like a safety issue just for civilizations, so that people could be up at different times, like protecting and guarding, which I guess makes sense, right? Like if we're all asleep at the same time, probably not great safety wise. So there is some sort of, research on that, but the truth is it does align with our rhythms. So if you are a night owl, and you say to somebody who's a night owl, I want you starting to go to bed at 9 p.m., you will actually really aggravate them, right? They're not sleepy. They're not ready to go to bed. Same thing if you say to a morning lark, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to bed at 10 or 11 tonight. They actively get frustrated, right? Because it's not in alignment with their natural clock. So when it comes to these, you can shift them a little, right? So, night owls, if you're going to bed at, 1 or 2 in the morning, ideally we want you shifted back a little bit, but that doesn't mean you're in bed at 9 or 10, right? You could still go to bed within your normal circadian rhythm of 11-ish, right? 10, 11, and be fine, right? Yeah. If you're somebody who, you can't, make it past 8 or whatever it is, and you say, but I want to go to sleep a little bit later, we can push you a little bit later so that maybe you're going to sleep around 9:30. But a lot of times people are not going to be morning people, morning larks aren't going to be the ones who want to be awake at 11 or 12, and that's fine. So I always tell people, work within sort of your archetype, your sleep archetype, as opposed to against it.
I like that advice, definitely. And so how do you fill the sleep balloon, and what do you fill it with?
It's a good question. So if I could like literally just have anybody watching just in their own head say the word sunlight, and then I'm going to say it like 1,000 times, right? You and I talked about the rule of 3, like, so sunlight, sunlight, sunlight. Think about it, right? So if you have ever been in a room and sound asleep and somebody opens the blinds, you feel it. Right. Yes, exactly. And so, it tends to be like this cover of, like no sort of feel to it. And so the reason is that there's a part of our brain that's what it's looking for. So before cell phones, before alarm clocks, before that, we still had to wake up and tend to fields or go hunting or gathering. And so we were developed in a way that we work within the sunlight. Right. And so it wakes you up when it says, okay, sun's here. And then when the sun starts going down, right, our body is made to then release those chemicals that help us fall asleep. So that sunlight is it's such an easy trigger for us to use, and we want to maximize it. And so think of those senses, right? So you have 5 senses, and I had a little kid teach me this, but I still use it. So it's, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? And what do you touch? And so those 5 is really what fills it, right? So if you are lying in bed and you've got the drapes closed and, you're not moving because let's say you didn't sleep well the night before, the problem is you're not filling that sleep balloon for that day, right? So now we're compensating for last night's poor sleep by not getting in sleep, not getting in movement, not, filling our senses in any way, which then our sleep balloon that night is going to be more deflated. And that's what we see, especially with sort of insomnia and those sort of things, is that people just get in this rut of trying to correct a poor night's sleep when we should be focusing on a good day, getting a good day, regardless of what my sleep was like. Your balloon from last night, it doesn't care, right? It's like, yes, got it. We had a poor night's sleep. Now, what do I got to do? Right. And that's where as humans, we get in our way because we tend to not understand that sleep balloon idea. And we tend to keep compensating for poor night's sleep.
It's just it's a strategy, and it's a life-bearing strategy. It really, truly. And I like it because I think it brings in a state of consciousness and an ability to be at your highest and best each and every day. Truly. It excites me
Yes.
in that realm. And how do we get in our own way and actually worsen our sleep when we think we're helping it?
So, again, we tend to look at our night's sleep, our previous night's sleep, and we tend to overthink it, right? We tend to be like, we're smarter than other animals, right? We've got this sleep thing down, right?
We love living in the past, right?
Oh my gosh, without a doubt, right? Or we worry about the future, right? So it's either like we're really upset about last night or we're super worried that we're not going to sleep tonight, right? Right. And as opposed to paying attention to like, hey, like, no, right? Like, get that sunlight, go move. Right. Yeah. And so we get in our way by once you sort of understand what builds those sleep chemicals, right? Then again, if I decide I had a poor night's sleep last night, and so my strategy is I'm going to go to bed earlier tonight, in theory, people would be like, of course. But when you understand how sleep works, that's the last thing you want to do, right? Because now if I go to bed early, I don't have as much time to build that sleep balloon. I've thrown off my circadian rhythm. Right. And so I'm going to have another poor night's sleep. Or I decide, I didn't sleep well yesterday. I'm too tired. I'm not going to work out today. I'm just going to conserve my energy. No. Right. Like, keep in mind that movement, those sort of things fill that sleep balloon. So, for individuals and even for corporations, you can do these things without it being big grand gestures. So, when I go in and sort of consult with companies, we look at where do you hold your meetings, and they'll have these beautiful meeting rooms with all these windows that aren't being used, and they meet in somebody's office, right? With like one little window, right? And so once you start understanding and you say to maximize your people being able to sleep and you being able to sleep.
Uh-huh.
Move this meeting to the room with the most light. You don't have to change anything else, right? Just get the most light in. If you are at a conference, right, where you have no choice, but you're in a room with no lights, right? Then when you go out, like we all do, to check a phone or make a phone call or go on break, stand by the window, right?
Oh, wow. Love that. Yeah, stand by the window, absorb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a client I work with, and he's just awesome, and he runs this large company, and so we Zoom, and when we were talking, he was facing, his window was behind him, right? And I've known him now long enough for him to know what I was going to say, right? But I was like, why are you not near? Why aren't you closer to your window, right? And he was like, well, I don't know, the desk is here, and I'm like, move the desk like 5 inches, right? Turn your chair
towards it.
Like, that's it, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to remodel. We don't have to, have the most, new inventions when it comes to sleep or turn your desk.
Yeah.
Move your desk, right? So all these sort of things, or bringing in things like mints to conferences, stimulate your senses. So have the same meeting, bring in mints, right? Start stimulating people's senses so that unbeknownst to them or you're building that sleep balloon.
Did you hear that, everyone? Stimulating the sensories. I love that. Hear, smell, see, touch, and taste.
Yep.
And even with taste, like you said, with a mint, that is, and it's soothing to the stomach as well. That's the other piece of that often a lot of people don't realize, is that a peppermint will also not only allow that stimulation, but it also soothes as well. And so what are the things that can steal the good night's sleep throughout the day? You mentioned a couple of these, of course, but dive a little bit deeper into that.
So the good news is that once you sort of understand, again, how it works and your focus becomes filling that sleep balloon, then typically when things steal our sleep, if we're not doing it purposely, like, waking up later, going to bed early, then a lot of times at night, we just don't maximize sort of what our sleep environment looks like. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, and that's that fourth quarter I talked about, so it's still important, right? But things like temperature is one of the main ones I talk about with people. So really making sure you have a cool bedroom. Our body wants to shut down, right? And so if it has to, if it's hot, it just cannot regulate as well. So keeping a cool bedroom. One of the things I tell people, so at my house, right, I have, sort of the main floor, and then the bedrooms are up here, right? So I have my thermostat set for that main room. I'm 10 degrees hotter upstairs, right? And so, making sure that when you're aware of this, that you are regulating temperatures where you sleep, not just on that main level, right? Or if you sleep in the basement and it's a lot colder, whatever it is. And temperatures, I'm Chicago, I know you're North Carolina, wherever our listeners are coming from, making sure that room sort of stays cool is incredibly important, because that will steal our sleep if it's too hot. And then, you get into, menopausal women, perimenopausal women that I speak to, you got the hot flashes and the hormones, and, so anything you can do to cool, right? The fans, the cooling sheets, the cooling pillows, making sure you have breathable clothes on, all that is incredibly helpful. Otherwise, it will steal our sleep. And the second one I talk about is noise. So when you go to sleep at night, just be very mindful that the one sense that does not shut off at night is our auditory sense. And it makes sense. I said sense like 5 times, but it makes sense because you need to be able to hear. That's why our fire alarm emits a noise and not a smell right. It's because it's the only thing, if we're sleeping, that isn't totally asleep, to keep us safe. So just to be mindful of what's in that environment, because knowing now that it doesn't fall asleep, it's going to keep waking you up if it senses changes. So if you fall asleep to a TV and the shows change, even if you fall asleep to content that is fine, if it senses anything different, something shuts off, something turns on, then what happens is that it's going to keep waking you up. And then those are the things that steal our sleep at night.
Yeah. And we know in broadcast, they turn up the commercials. and of course, there's the 8-second flashes, and there's there's strategy in the way shows are designed and produced and developed. So there's constant flickering, and there's constant audio changes and like you're saying. So how could somebody sleep well? Right? Yeah.
And I'm
And
a fan of there's actually brown noise and green noise. And so, people go to the standard white noise. Brown noise and green noise, it's just different frequencies. That's what the different noises are about, basically. But to me, those are two of my favorites. So there's something in those that will slow down my brain much better than, a standard white noise or anything like that. So play with the different noises as well. So again, put on a white noise or put on a brown noise, put on a green noise. There's pink noise. I mean, there's literally every color out there, but try some brown or green. And those really help people at night, especially if your mind is, if you're a thinker.
Yeah. Got it. And so what's the secret to the key for insomnia, and how long should we stay in our bed when we're awake? Because I sometimes do this. I'll wake up about 3:30 and I'll lay there.
I dread even saying it because this is the part where people are like, they get so mad at this response, but it's so true, right? Because the reality is that what happens with insomnia is you start pairing your bed with somewhere that you're awake versus somewhere that you're asleep. And so psychologically, we have to unpair those. And the only way to unpair that is to now have sleep be the only thing in bed, right? So I always tell, clients, sleep and sex are the only things that should be happening in bed. Other than that, right, you need to be out of that bed. So if you wake up at 3:30 or anytime, or you go to bed and you're not falling asleep, you give yourself about a 15 to 20 minute window, and then you have to get out of that bed. And you're not going and doing anything like stimulating or doing dishes or anything like that, right? Like you're doing things, I call it a comfy place, right? You just go to your comfy place, right? And you just relax, right? You can listen to music. Now I always tell people, if you can avoid your phones, avoid your phones. What I've learned in doing this in as many places and with many people is people bring out their phones. It doesn't even matter anymore to be like, don't bring out your phone. So I encourage you that if you are going to bring out your phone, which you are, just make sure that we're not like going into, any sort of feed systems, right? Instagrams, Facebooks, any of those that are just going to keep feeding you content because you don't have control over it. And when you don't have control over it, if you see something stimulating, now we're not going to go to sleep. If you see something upsetting, or if you see something frustrating, or even something that makes you really excited or sad, right, then it's just harder to fall asleep. So, if you're going to go on your phone, just make sure you're clicking the nighttime settings to have it be as much blue light remiss as possible. But when you're doing that, just make sure the things you're doing are not stimulating. So read a book, listen to some music, but try to stay away from those sort of constant feed systems.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned light earlier, and this light is different than sunlight. Big difference, night and day difference, right? I mean, it's
Thank you for clarifying. Yes. Right. That does not mean I want you seeing more of your phone. I want you getting more, or even if you can't, in Chicago, we can't necessarily go outside and get sunlight in the winter, right? It's just not happening, right? But you still have some coming through the clouds. Or, I have something called, it's over there. It's like a happy light, right? You can buy in places, and if you don't have any of that, turn on your lights, right? Like you just want it to look like an awake environment with light if you can't get sunlight.
What about reading? Like a lot of people, I'll get up, if I can't get back to sleep, I'll just get up and grab my book and read.
Yes. So reading, I always tell people experiment, right? So read and see what happens, right? I'm like, so if I read, I will be asleep in no time, right? Like it is one of my easiest, right? I like pull it out and I'm like, this is perfect. Now, there's this book, I can't even think of the name of it now, like 3 years ago, I was like, this is my go-to, right? So I got out of bed, I opened it, but I wanted to see who the murderer was. And so then my reading activity, like I couldn't do that book, right? Because I wanted to find out the next thing. It was like one of those whodunit things, right? So just with reading, to make sure that whatever you're reading also isn't stimulating, where you want to know like what happens, because then that will keep you up as well.
Are there breathing techniques? I'm curious. Are there breathing techniques in that 15 to 20 minute period before you get up that people used to say count sheep, right? So are
Yep.
there breathing techniques or anything like that that are good?
So deep breathing is always helpful just
Yeah.
in life, right? It helps sort
Okay.
of lower, our, fight or flight system, and which
Mm,
helps us then calm down and helps us
yeah.
sleep. So, any sort of deep breathing, I do sort of a take 5 where I breathe in for 5 and then hold it and then release it. But when I release it, it's like blowing out candles on like my
Yeah.
age cake and not like my 13-year-old's age cake, right? Like there's gonna be a lot more wind. Exactly. Right. It's like that's not my cake, right? Like I got a lot more candles. So it's really having people like take it in, fill up the lungs, hold it, and then release it fully,
Uh-huh.
and doing that a full time. Another thing I love is progressive muscle relaxation. It's basically, it walks you through different parts of your body. And as it does it, it just tenses it and releases it. And it a lot of times keeps our brain busy and our bodies busy. So I'm a huge fan of that. You can, if you just Google progressive muscle relaxation, there's a ton of scripts and a ton of people who do it. And so sometimes just to listen to that, and then that way too, if you're listening to it, then your brain has less of a chance of wandering away.
I love it.
So yes, breathing or that I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, there's something to say in a lot of the work we do, especially with leadership development. We talk about courage, humility, discipline.
Yes.
And so setting up this routine and sticking to a routine and how complementary it is to being able to co-create and to make better decisions, and therefore your engagement level changes and your productivity goes up, and it's just efficient and effective in so many ways. So talk about more strategies. Give a couple more scenarios and then talk about those strategies for those.
So one of the things that I always get asked, so I'll share it with your listeners because I'm sure it's on their mind, is, especially when you're leaders, how do you turn your brain off at night? Right?
Right.
It sounds wonderful, right? Like, oh, just go to sleep and then listen to some noise and all's good, right? Like it's not. And a lot of times too, right, when you are a leader or sort of, when you're running, businesses and companies or things like that, or managing people, or you have deadlines and those sort of things, it's very hard to just shut the computer off, right? And then just go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we have to look at too is how to start taking control of our thinking back, right? So you talk about productivity, right? Between 7.2 to 7.4 hours a week of productivity is lost in a poor sleeper. So you lose 7 hours on average a week. Now multiply that by anybody who works hourly for you, multiply that by anybody who's on a deadline, anybody working, right? You lose 7 hours of sleep when they're not, or 7 hours of productivity. You also have a 49% higher turnover rate with people who aren't sleeping, right? And so there's a reality to this, that if we don't learn how to your point, make it a part of our routine, right? It costs us and our mental health, right? We see huge increases in anxiety and depression and those sort of things. So once you sort of start normalizing the routine of it, Will, and understanding the importance of that sleep balloon, and you sort of go to bed and you go, okay, I did everything she said, right? I got the sunlight, I stimulated my senses, and I lay down, and now I'm thinking about this project I have to do or whatever it is. One of the main things I tell people is we forget, like, we have control over our brain. It's our brain, right? Like sometimes we lay down and we're like, oh, it keeps thinking about this, right? It's your brain, right? And so, there's something called cognitive distraction, which basically means like distract it, like stop it, right? Like basically, right? And so how you do that is you have to sort of tell it what you want it to think about. So if it's running through things that you don't want it to think about, which is what it does when we put our head on the pillow or when we wake up at 3:30 in the morning, right? So when it's doing that, just you want to start creating for yourself what you want it to think about. So for me, I love water. I'm a huge water person, right? So when my mind is going, right, I will slow it down. And if all I say to it is, let's think about, being on a beach, it's like, okay. And now you still have to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is, right? So you can't just give it a thought and expect it to go with it. You have to create it, right? Use all of those sensory things, right? So I'm sitting at the water. What kind of water, right? It's a warm water, and it's an ocean, right? And what time of day is it? Well, it's for me, it would probably be, maybe it's dusk and I see the sun setting, right? And it feels cool on my skin, and maybe I'm sitting in the sand on a blanket and I can picture, feeling the sand in between, my fingers. And then, maybe I'm hearing a little bit of birds in the sky, not too many, but maybe I hear, a few birds, and let's say there's nothing around, and maybe somebody's built a bonfire over to my right, and I can smell the bonfire, and I smell like sort of the smoke, right? And I can see the sun going down as I'm smelling that smoke. Everything I'm talking to you about right now, it's called cognitive distraction. I'm creating a scene that your brain can start grasping onto. So when it's at night telling you all about either, issues you have, or it's telling you about stuff you need to do, or like we said earlier, all the stuff from the past we think about, or all the stuff in the future, stop it and create a scene for it and just retake control of it so that you tell it what you want it to think about as you're trying to fall asleep.
That's so powerful. That is, and I can see it. I can see that working very well, especially within teams and within the work environment as well. That is a very powerful process for being more present, or maybe even becoming present, getting in that present state of being, and instead of that future anxiety or that past worry, like you're saying. How powerful. That is great stuff. Wow. Absolutely. And I can see how it fuels and feeds. We always coach, manage your energies, your feelings, your emotions, energies to your priorities. And each day be intentional about setting those and working through those throughout the day, massaging them. But I like this idea of incorporating sensory and especially sunlight, right? And movement. I love this. Yes, I love this. Love this. So again, how important is this nighttime ritual versus morning ritual versus these 4 quarters? How important is this ritual that you've been talking about?
First of all, I love that you say like the 4, don't ask me anything more about football though, because that is the extent of my knowledge. That's about where I would have to answer, right? Like I know there's 4 quarters. I know my team loses a lot, but so when it comes to sort of those 4 quarters, again, that nighttime ritual is incredibly important too, right? You still have to set it up, and you still have to understand it. So, I have 13, almost 14-year-old twins. And, so, I think about when they were babies and even up until now, right? Like, oh my goodness, the preparation for bedtime for kids, it's off the charts, right? It's like, here's your lavender lotions and here's your lavender bath, and we're going to take a bath, and let's listen to our songs, and we're going to read a book, right? And then we're going to make sure your bed is all comfy and cozy, and you have your little stuffed animal, and we spend a solid 30 minutes to an hour getting our kids ready for bed. We dim down the lights, and you put the stars in this, right? Like all of this. I remember doing all this, right? And then for adults, and especially, for leaders and individuals, right? We're working, right? We're trying to make sure everybody else is taken care of. And then it's like, 10:30 at night, we're like, oh, it's time for bed. And we shut down our laptop or our phone. And then we go up to bed, and we're like, I don't know why I'm not sleeping, right? And you've done absolutely nothing to tell your body it's time to go to sleep. Like just 10 minutes ago, you were telling it, you need to send out an email, you need to work on this, you need to do X, Y, or Z. And now 10 minutes later, it's like, now it's bedtime. Your body just doesn't work that way, right? You got to tell it no, we're getting ready for bed, right? So the stuff that you got to do to start getting rid of those sort of sleep hormones that you got to start sort of flushing through my system, now is the time, right? And so we have to start cueing it, right? In that nighttime ritual. So, turning down some of those bright lights, right? Making sure that we're not eating too close to bedtime, because, if you eat and then 10 minutes later you're going to bed, your GI system is like, I can't sleep because you just filled me. I've got to do something with this now, right? Or just in terms of alcohol too. When we have it too close to bed, it will help us fall asleep because it's a depressant, but then it wakes us up later in the night, and it starts messing with our other sort of stages of sleep. So that nighttime routine is incredibly important. Start winding it down, right? Maybe if you're going to, take a walk or things like that, you can take a walk, get in some sunlight. If you can't do any of that, as the sun's going down, right? Then make sure that you've got sort of your comfy places. You've got maybe some teas you have at night. And even if you don't want to do any of that, I always ask the question, if somebody came into your home at night, would they look at you and go, oh, they're about to go to sleep? Or would they look at you and go, I actually don't know what time, if I didn't know what time of day it was outside, she looks like she's working. She looks like she's working on stuff. She's cleaning the kitchen. She's doing X, Y, or Z. So really look at it and just ask, if somebody from the outside didn't know what time it was, would they look at what you're doing and say, this person is getting ready for sleep? And if not, you have to start really teaching your body that it's time to sleep.
I love it. And it's like you said, it's simple things, but yet we need to create that routine. And so that the emotional state and the cognitive state both are working in sync with and creating like you said, the hormones in order to get into that state and have those deeper sleeps. I love this. I'm curious. I wrote down, I often hear, I'm forced to do more with less, and therefore I work longer hours. I don't necessarily eat as well, so I try to eat more during the middle of the day. And so I'm more concerned, though, with people that work 14, 16, sometimes 18. I know people who work 18-hour days, and they do it methodically. And, and I know there is a whole industry that works methodically 16, 14, 18-hour days seasonally. Let's talk about the financial industry, right? And their kind of hours they hold. So we already know that the statistics are there. There's lots of stress. There's lots of anxiety, lots of depression, and they get burnout very, very quickly. But how might they create this pattern and this routine? And how would that benefit them in productivity to implement some of these things? So, create a scenario for someone like that, like a CPA or those types of individuals.
So I love your question, right? Because the reality is that at all times we can't have great sleep, right? There's just going to be times and seasons when it's not going to be good.
Right.
And that's okay, right? That's okay. We just can't have it be every day all the time, right? But there are going to be times, right? You're in the middle of tax season. You have, these, going out, you have a big presentation you have to do. You have, you have kids at home that are sick, right? You have people that called off and you've got to go cover and now work a longer shift. So the reality is that sleep isn't perfect. And I love that you bring this up, because what affects our sleep more than almost anything is that we try to make it perfect, right? Like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep at 10. And then if I wake up at 7, that's 8 hours, right? And like you and I briefly touched on, we've got the Oura rings and we've got all these sort of devices now, and people are checking their scores. And we're seeing anxiety, it's called orthosomnia, around non-perfect sleep scores. It's like, oh my goodness, like, no, right? Like, let's not create more anxiety, right? So if you are having to have an 18-hour workday, right? And you're having to do that, a few weeks in a row, just understand what you're doing, right? Your circadian rhythm clock is going to be off. It's not going to get it. So you're going to be more fatigued. You're going to be more tired. Now, if you are more fatigued and tired, understand that the only thing you still have to worry about is your sleep balloon. Right? Like, that's all, it's still always your focus, right? So make sure that when you're up, you're getting in that light, right? Make sure that when you're going to sleep, even if it's after 18 hours, that you're setting up sort of that nighttime, right? So it doesn't really matter. It's just not catastrophizing it and not compensating for it, right? So if we're starting to take sleeping pills, if we're starting to drink more, if we're starting to, be tired because of our 18-hour days and drinking more coffee during the day, understand that this is not going to help you sleep.
Love that. I love it. Love it. Love it. And so how can people, as we wrap this up, I'm going to, dive into connecting with you, but how I know, I think you've got a blog, and I think you also have other realms of where people can connect. So I've put up here your drift course. Talk a little bit about your drift course and share with the audience what that's about.
So drift course, what it does is it really helps you focus on your day. And it helps you understand what you have to be doing. And it's very simple. So I myself, it's 5 part video, because Lord knows if you gave me a lot more than that, I wouldn't even watch it. Right. And I'm a huge fan of give me something to do with it. Right. Like I want a practical strategy that I can take with me. Right. I don't want more theory, and I want more stats. Right. So what drift course really is it's sort of like me and what I do in my sessions, but available to you as you need it, right? So there's the videos, there's a workbook with it. It walks you through sort of creating your own sleep balloon, your own experiment for that comfy place that we talked about earlier. There's a whole section on creating that nighttime routine. There's just everything so that you get to understand you and your sleep and what you need to do, because it's different, right? And to your point, there's people here who have different types of days and hours and jobs. And so, a one-time thing of take a pill, it doesn't help, right? And so it's really sort of course, is to maximize it for you so that you know what you need to do. There's things on there in terms of things to avoid that help you, diet wise and drink wise and all those sort of things. So it's just really meant to be something that people can follow. And I'm on Instagram a lot, posting random strategies and tips. Just usually it's something that I'm doing and it hits me and I'm like, I'm going to share this. And, so I go on and randomly post a few second video on there. So, I'm on Instagram doing that a lot, LinkedIn and those sort of things, just to keep it front and center to people that no matter what time of day it is, you can actually be working on your sleep at that point.
I love it. I love it. And so I definitely want people to be able to connect with you, and you're out there on LinkedIn and you're very active on social media quite often, speaking to and with, dialoguing with your clients and your followers that you've got as well. Dr. Lemke, what is a big takeaway for everybody today?
So if I say sunlight again, is it overkill? Because it kills me not to say sunlight, just because it's such a powerful one. But right, the besides sunlight, right? The key is that understanding that sleep starts the moment you open your eyes. Yeah. That's when you need to start thinking about sleep, is from the moment those eyes open. So, right, really making sure that if you're somebody who, says, I'm going to give myself a few extra minutes, or I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z, that you say, no, today I'm focusing on this. I'm focusing on my senses. You don't have to go take a walk. Many people, and I consult with a lot of organizations and law firms and companies, and a lot of times you can't get up and go take a walk. It's just not an option, right? So really to understand those little things and to empower you that even if sleep has been evading you for most of your life, that you can literally start the moment that you stop watching this, you can start working on your sleep right now for tonight.
I love it.
And through little ways.
Oh, I love it. On your website, I love this. You say, whether you are a child, adolescent, or adult, you deserve a life of joy, serenity, and confidence. Yes. Where did that come from? That is one, it's beautiful, but it is very meaningful. What made you write that?
I think I'm blessed to have worked with so many people who crave that, right? Like that's almost everybody's desire when they come in, and myself included. And it doesn't matter if you're the little kids that we see up to sort of the big multi-million dollar, like everybody just wants joy and everybody wants peace and everybody wants confidence. And so really anybody can have it regardless of age. Just to, like you said before, prioritizing yourself, prioritizing your health, prioritizing your mental health, your sleep, all of that so that we can get there.
All right. One more thing from your website that I love. It says, you put a quote out there by John Updike, and it says, you can't change everything in one night, but one night can change everything. Yes. And today's session, you kind of put a beautiful bow around that quote. But why are you so inspired by that? Was that something that you've had all along, and it was kind of one of those things that pulled you into who you are and what you do and how you
Absolutely.
give to the world your talents. Yeah.
And just it really just does take one night
Mhm.
sometimes, right? It resets you, right? Sometimes, and again, I'm a mom. I own two businesses. I do a lot of things, and sometimes I just need that good night's sleep that one night, and I'm a better mom the next day. I'm a better friend. I'm a better leader. I'm a better everything. Right. And
Mhm.
so, sometimes one night can truly just sort of restart us down a different path. And
Yeah.
so when I sort of read that, I was like, I could so relate to that.
Yeah. Well-being. Well-being starts with those kinds of intentions and mindsets and attitudes. I love that. I can't thank you enough today. I could sit and talk to you for hours, I'm sure of it, because I've got all little tidbits and all kinds of notes that I took today. I really, truly appreciate you stopping your trajectory and coming on to the podcast today to share with everyone your expertise and your niche in this world of the gifts and talents that you offer. And sleep is very critical to our well-being. And these tidbits and strategies that you gave us to really implement into the workplace. I love that idea of really adding light to a meeting space and getting near a window if you are on the phone and having, conversations with people, and ways in which you can set up your home and really create a space where there is that serenity and there is that joy, and you can set your mindset into falling asleep. And I love that idea of telling your mind that it's okay to sleep.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes too, and if you even just say it's okay to rest, take the pressure off of sleep, that I'm just going to rest.
Yeah.
And then by taking the pressure off of sleep, then we just allow our bodies to rest.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate you. And I know that as we put this out there in the world, it's like I always say, it's like a coffee book. We produce it, it's live, but then it just gets put out there and people listen to it and read it and watch it and follow the script. And it's a great tool for people to connect with you. I look forward to them reaching out to you we of course work in LinkedIn, but please feel free to connect with her on Instagram as well. I know she keeps all of her Instagram and social media channels all the same. So again, thank you very much. And we will talk soon.
I appreciate you, Lori. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And by the way, everybody, our next month's podcast is going to be November 11th. So 11/11, and we're going to have Katie Schlipp, and she is the president of laboratory services for Alchemy, which is a global pharmaceutical company. And we're really excited to have her come on board. And she's going to be talking about maximizing career progression. And she's going to talk a little bit and share about her career, and then also about just career projection and progression and what that means as a maximized leader. And so I'm very, very excited to have her next month. Thank you again, and everyone have a blessed day. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Maximize Excellence. Visit our events page on our website for details on upcoming podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel to listen to past episodes. And remember to ask yourself at the end of each day, did I do my best to maximize excellence today?